Welcome to the very first double review of a bus depot that I'm doing on my channel. This is the JFK depot, and this is the Far Rockaway depot. The routes that JFK has are the Q6, Q7, Q8, Q9, Q10, Q37, Q40, Q41, Q52, and Q60. On Far Rockaway's end, you have the Q11, Q21, Q22, Q35, and for the express routes, the QM15, QM16, QM17, and QM18. The shared fleet between these two depots include the Orion 7 Old Gen Hybrids, the Orion 7 Next Gen Hybrids, the New Flyer XD60s, the 2015-16 and 2019-2020 models, and for the express routes, it's the exact same as College Point and Eastchester, the D4500 CLs from MCI, and the X345s from Prevost. Normally I'd start this review off talking about the depot's routes, but here's the problem. This depot's maintenance is so bad, and it's so notoriously bad, that I can't talk about the routes first without talking about how bad this depot's maintenance is. JFK Depot, along with LaGuardia Depot, has a reputation for being one of the worst depots in the entire MTA bus company establishment. Now, is this exactly true? Yes, it is for JFK Depot. LaGuardia not so much anymore, but we're gonna get to that next time. But anyway, JFK Depot's maintenance is bad, and we're talking like apocalyptic levels, because you got buses that have parts falling off, parts that are being held together literally with duct tape. Recently I saw a video of footage surfacing of a Q52 with a 2015-16 XD60, a 5300, running down Cross Bay with the side panel open. That thing looks like it's ready to fall off and fling something into traffic. Not a good sign. You also have JFK Old Gens breaking down, and they're breaking down faster than they can keep them. You also have a JFK Old Gen with the rear sign, the rear destination sign, falling off. Seriously, JFK, What is your deal against your old gens? I understand that these buses are old and they're going to be on their way out soon, but you don't need to kill them faster, because in case you haven't noticed, you need these buses in order to survive. Far Rockaway cannot keep bailing you out forever, and it's sad to see that these buses, these relics of Orion, the last bastions of the Orion bus industry, are now being treated like shit because this depot wants to kill them really quickly. Listen, JFK, if you have a vendetta, if you have such a vendetta against your old gens, send them shits to LaGuardia or Baisley Park, please, or give them to Far Rockaway. But anyway, it's a shame this depot doesn't take care of its equipment, because I really do like this depot's selection of routes. Sure, you have some rather unremarkable routes like the Q40 or the Q9, but you also have other routes like the Q6, Q7, and Q8. All of these head from the Jamaica 165th bus terminal, the 6 serving the JFK cargo area, along with the Q7 serving East New York at Euclid Avenue, and then the Q8 serving Brooklyn, going into Gateway Mall at Spring Creek. Now, the two routes that stick out the most from JFK, at least to me, are the Q10 and the Q52. The Q10 because it goes from Lefferts Boulevard, it goes from Union Turnpike and Queens Boulevard at the Kew Garden subway station to the JFK Air Train station. It runs down Lefferts Boulevard via Artex and is one of JFK's only 2 Arctic routes, the other being the Q52. Now, here's the thing. I like JFK's selection of Arctic equipment. Despite this depot not taking care of their equipment, JFK's Arctics, the 5300s and the 6200s, are probably amongst my favorite selection of New Flyer XD60 Arctics in the entire MTA. Right up there with West Farms' XN60 SBS wrapped buses. But we'll get to West Farms eventually. Like I was saying, the Q10 and the Q52 are probably JFK's star routes for me. The 52 namely because it runs from the entire corridor of Woodhaven Boulevard all the way down to Cross Bay Boulevard, and then crosses the Cross Bay Bridge to Broad Channel, and then into the Rockaways before heading towards Arvern. Then, of course, the Q10 was JFK's pilot route when it came to having Arctics. And I have a lot of memories on that route too. Like I was saying, JFK's route selection is pretty decent. It's not exactly something that'll wow you, but I like these routes enough that they almost make up for the depot's shitty maintenance. Now, what about the equipment? Well, JFK's equipment is a bit of a mixed bag. So you got old gens, cool, but they're old gens they don't take care of. And trust me, you can tell the difference between riding a LaGuardia old gen or a Basic Park old gen compared to riding a JFK old gen. And then you got Hawker next gens, or as me and Chris refer to them as rough top or hard top next gens. To my knowledge, JFK is the only non-Manhattan depot that has these, and they're getting more of these as Manhattan is getting rid of most of their rough top next gens. JFK also has some Spectrum next gens, and JFK has a bunch of other next gens that, like, okay, whatever. But honestly, having rough tops and having Spectrums is pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. Now, I know I said the Eastchester probably had the most unique next gens out of the entire MTA bus company, but JFK might be up there with them, just because of the fact that it's the only MTA bus depot that has the rough tops, which is pretty cool in my opinion if you ask me. I already mentioned the XD60s and how I think these 6200s and the 5300s are my favorite XD60s in the entire MTA bus company. But again, having the 5300s and being that JFK is the only other MTA bus company depot besides Baisley Park that has them is pretty cool. I also nicknamed these the XD60 Blues to differentiate themselves from the 6200s because of their deep blue signs. I remember when I first saw these on the Q52 and I was thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. And honestly it was. The deep blue sign really does sort of highlight this bus, and it makes it stand out amongst the other buses on Woodhaven and Cross Bay Boulevards. Now, that's pretty much all I have to say for the equipment. And honestly, on this side of the bay, things are not really looking good. Now, can Far Rockaway make up for it? Well, let's hand it over to Chris and let's see what he has to say.
All right, this is the far Rockaway. This is the far Rockaway depot. The routes that they have are Q11, Q21, Q22, Q35, and Q41. And I also cannot forget about their express routes, them being the QM15, QM16, QM17, and QM18. QM15, 16, and 17 all run down Woodhaven, while the 18 runs down Lefferts. Anyways, in terms of their equipment, it's mostly shared with JFK. However, they do have some of their own equipment, them being Orion 7 old gen hybrid, second gen plus hybrids, and Orion 7 next gen hybrids, both Hawkers and Lithiums. For express routes, same old, same old. MCI D4500 CLs and the new Prevost car X345s. In terms of their local routes, I am pretty much a big fan of Q11 and Q21. I really do like the Woodhaven Boulevard and Cross Bay Boulevard routes, as they pretty much go through my favorite places to fan. Ozone Park, Howard Beach. Really am a big fan of fanning over there. Like those areas when it comes to fanning. You also got the JFK Airport, which they go near there. Now, with the Queens bus redesign, pretty much these routes are gonna really be fucked. Especially Q11, as it's only gonna go from Rockaway Boulevard and Cross Bay to Old Howard Beach. Anyways, on the other hand, the Q21 will be taking over the northern portion of the Q29 into Jackson Heights. I have mixed feelings about that. However, we'll leave the redesign summary into a different video. So far, with their equipment, for Rockaway, their maintenance it's alright. Definitely better than JFK, but they're no Mother Clara Hale or Grand Avenue Depot, I'll tell you that much. They really baby their buses. Some of the best maintenance in the system comes from those two depots. But this is Far Rockaway Depot. They're pretty rough right now. One thing that this depot loves to do, though, is bail out JFK. Oh, and they love doing it. They love doing it so much that they took a lot of well, not a lot, but they took most of JFK's equipment and pretty much stole them. Gained ownership of those buses. So now, Far Rockaway houses next gens, as they previously was an old gen only depot. But I tell you what, see, as much as I don't like the next gens, seeing next gens out of Far Rockaway is a blessing to me. I think that they're actually pretty comfortable and they look really good over there. Reminds me of the RTSs in Far Rockaway, back when Far Rockaway used to have RTSs. And not just Far Rockaway, but JFK and other depots that had RTSs, man, and I'm telling you, South Queens was dominated by RTSs, while the northern part of Queens was dominated by Orion 5s. The old gens were everywhere, though. In terms of Far Rockaway selections of routes, they're pretty good. I did explain before how much I like the Q11 and Q21. Q22 is also a really interesting route. And the Q35, Flatbush to Rockaway Park. You cannot go wrong with that. However, I do wish the Q11 and Q21 and Q41 were JFK routes. And also, the Q35 could have been split with Spring Creek. But that's another story for another time. The Q41 is also a pretty cool route, but it's kind of, it's a little bit weird. It has a little bit of a weird backstory to it. But anyways, other than that, Far Rockaway is pretty good. In terms of final score, I'll give them like a 7.3 out of 10. A 7.3. I feel like that's a good score for them. Anyways, I'm going to hand it back to Edgar, and he'll continue with the history trip.
Now for a history trip. Before these two were taken under the MTA's lease, they were both once garages for a private bus company called Green Bus Lines. Green Bus was incorporated by a man named William Cooper and another man named Martin Klein in 1925. Originally, the sole route that Green Bus was operating was a segment of the current Q8 101st Avenue and Jerome Avenue route. The company formed as a collection of several independently operated lines, of which the owners would operate the buses and become stockholders of said company. Green was granted some Manhattan routes in 1933, which included the current M22, M50, M79, M86, and M96. These routes were eventually transferred in 1935 to Comprehensive Omnibus Corporation and later New York Omnibus Corporation. In 1936, Green took Liberty bus lines in. The borough system would then be divided into four lettered zones, and the zone that Green would take over was reserved as Zone C, which included areas like Woodhaven, Richmond Hill, Ozone Park, Howard Beach, and the Rockaways. During this move, Green would also incorporate some other bus companies' lines into his systems. One of Green's acquisitions, or the most notable one, was the ex-Manhattan and Queens Transit Traction Company's line into Manhattan along Queens Boulevard, which we know as today as the modern Q60 route. Green stockholders would also acquire Triborough Coach Corps and Jamaica buses in the late 40s, modern-day LaGuardia and modern-day Paisley Park Depot respectively. These three companies would eventually take over Command. Would create Command Bus Company, the modern-day Spring Creek Depot, to take over routes left behind by the defunct Pioneer Bus Company in 1979. In the 50s, when the Long Island Railroad closed the Rockaway Beach Branch's Brooklyn Manor Station, Green Lines created the QM23 service to Manhattan, but the QM23 was killed in 2010 due to budget cuts. During the 2000s, the MTA began taking over numerous private bus companies across the city. Green was one of them, being taken over and having its two depots become the JFK and Far Rockaway garages. Far Rockaway was noted for being a depot that got heavily damaged during Hurricane Sandy, as many of the Rockaways did. Along with LaGuardia Depot, Far Rockaway's routes would eventually be sent to some other depots, with other depots being such as LaGuardia, College Point, and Spring Creek. Eventually, however, Far Rockaway Depot would be repaired, and many of its routes came back. During the Green Bus era, the depot also used to operate RTSs, and it also used to operate Orion 5 Suburbans and whatnot. Another thing that I think you'd find interesting about this depot, as I mentioned before, was that this was one of Queens' pilot depots when it came to having Arctics. The Q10 at one point had New Flyer D60HFs, same with the Q113 and the Q111. Eventually, this depot was along with Paisley Park to get the first ever MTA bus articulated buses in 2015 and 16. But anyway, that's enough about the history trip. It's time for my final thoughts on JFK. Overall, my final thoughts on JFK is that it desperately needs a lot of help. I'm not talking about Far Rockaway Depot bailing it out all the time kind of help. This isn't Wall Street. There is no bailouts here. What I'm trying to say is that JFK really does need to improve itself, because this depot is a very crucial depot and has routes that people use, mainly the Q60 and the Q10, also the Q52, but when it comes to JFK's routes and when it comes to its equipment, it's got things there that have promise. It really does. But the problem is, again, with this depot is this maintenance. You cannot have buses that are falling apart and being held together with duct tape and just call it a day. Again, Far Rockaway cannot keep bailing you out forever, and JFK, you're going to eventually need to get it together once the Novas come in. Now, I don't want to hear that the Novas are going to make everything better. It won't matter in the end if you can't maintain your equipment for worth a damn. But anyway, with all this ranting and raving over, I'm going to give JFK a very, very very, very generous 4 out of 10. This depot has potential. It has potential to be one of Queens' best MTA bus depots, maybe matching College Point or Baisley Park. But again, it needs to get itself together, and it needs to figure out what it wants to be, and the maintenance needs to vastly improve. Once you improve your maintenance, JFK, then we can have another discussion. But until then, I'm the NYC Railroader, splitting this review with CB Fanning. You guys stay safe out there. Have a great night, have a great day, weekend, whatsoever. And thank you for watching. Peace.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Tune and rhythm,